So, good morning. I want to talk this morning about reactivity, which is a pretty broad catch-all term, but I want to talk about it as it relates to our suffering. And, in both its emotional and mental forms, it's really deeply ingrained in us. It's probably hardwired at a pretty primitive level, and it comes in all shapes and sizes. It can be the slightest little irritation on one end to a sort of full-blown tantrum on the other and everything in between. Although it doesn't always manifest as anger or irritation, it can manifest in any other a number of ways. Sadness can be a form of reactivity. Joy can be, for that matter. But it's almost always one way or the other a product of our ego. And it can be both a response to suffering, or it can also be the source of suffering, or it can be both. It's a knee-jerk kind of reflexive response to stimuli, whether that's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It tends to be emotionally based. And from the Buddhist perspective, it's really a function of one of the three poisons of craving or attachment, aversion or hatred, or ignorance or delusion. So it's usually grounded in one of those. And of course, all three of those have to do with ego as well. But the problem is that reactivity tends to cloud our ability to see clearly. It tends to get in the way of the present moment. It sort of takes us out of the present moment. And it's not just that it causes suffering. It's that it does cause suffering, but it also inhibits us from experiencing the moment and the sort of the beauty of the moment, and it injects sort of emotional noise, if you will, into the system, into our experience. And this is the heart of reactivity, because it not only entangles us in suffering, it really robs us of the present moment. It really kicks us out of that. And it's both automatic and usually unconscious. It's why our mindfulness and our mindful awareness is so important. It is the unexamined, if we fail to examine it, the unexamined impulse to grasp at what we desire, to push away what we don't like, or ignore what seems important, unimportant rather, ignore what seems unimportant. And this is just the cycle of suffering that the Buddha described, this endless loop of conditioned habits. Reactivity is very often seen as conditioned habit of the mind that perpetuates dissatisfaction, prevents greater freedom. And it's not that it simply produces anger, fear, frustration. It narrows our vision of life. It really sort of puts the blinders on, and we just sort of focus whatever it is we're reacting to. That becomes our emphasis at that moment. It keeps us locked in patterns of distraction. Reactivity is a distracting experience because it takes over. It hijacks the moment. It hijacks our peace of mind. It hijacks our serenity. When we are reactive, we are not truly present to what is happening in the here and now. We're focused on that reactivity. We are instead consumed by our judgments, consumed by our preferences, consumed by our not so skillful emotional responses. That's the sort of bottom line here, that it just hijacks our judgments, our preferences, and our emotional responses. So for instance, when someone speaks harshly to us, we might immediately feel reactive. We might feel anger. We might feel resentment. We might feel our feelings are hurt. But in that moment, we're not necessarily aware of the sensations in our body or the tone of the other person's voice, or even the opportunity to practice compassion for ourselves. We get swept away in our reactivity. We close ourselves off from the broader reality of the situation. It shuts down any spaciousness that we might be experiencing. And here again, the Buddha would offer us mindfulness as an antidote to this reactivity, because that is the practice of paying attention to the present moment with curiosity, with openness, with non-judgment. When we cultivate mindfulness, we create that space between stimulus and response. Without that space, we go right from stimulus to reactivity, which is the response. It's just boom, we're right there. It's that fast. But when we bring mindfulness to it, when we begin to watch our emotions as they arise, when we can notice them, when we can pause, we see things as they truly are, not through this habitual distorting lens of reactivity. And therein lies the spacious awareness that is so welcomed. It's the simple joy of being fully present with whatever's going on in the moment, whether that's the warmth of the sun on our skin, the sound of the birds singing because it's spring, the kindness of a stranger, on and on and on. We are open to that experience when we're not bogged down in reactivity. When we are reactive, we miss these experiences because our minds are preoccupied with clinging, with resisting, with avoiding. The light of awareness is dimmed when we're in a reactive mode, and the vividness of our life experience sort of fades into the background. But when we let go, when we begin to catch the reactivity, not respond to it so reflexively, we rediscover the world with greater spaciousness, with a fresh perspective, with a sense of awe, with a sense of gratitude that is always available to us, but which we mostly overlook if we're in reactive mode. So imagine, let's say, for example, I'm walking through the park, I see a beautiful flower. If I'm reactive, I might just ignore it. I might just walk past it or sort of give it a passing glance. Or I might be, because I'm distracted by the thoughts of the day, I'm replaying what happened and I'm having some replaying of reactivity. Oh, I should have done this, or boy, that was really painful, or whatever. But what if I tune into that flower, okay, as though I'm seeing it for the first time. I'm seeing it with fresh eyes. I notice the color. I notice the petals. I notice the beauty. I smell it. I go over and really engage with it. In that moment of presence, it's not just a flower. It's a manifestation of spaciousness, of life's wonder, and a reminder of this interconnected web of existence that we always talk about. Now, the good news here is that reactivity is not written in stone. It's not a fixed trait that we can do nothing about. It is a habit of mind that can be interrupted with practice. And we're going to go through some of those tools, which we often do. But the Buddha offered us practical tools to help us manage our reactivity more skillfully and reconnect with the moment, reconnect with the wonders all around us, starting, of course, with our mindfulness. If we only begin to do this during our sitting practice, where we sit quietly, we observe the breath, we observe bodily sensations, we observe our thoughts as things arise, and through that, we begin to see the patterns of reactivity. We're sitting quietly, a thought will come up, and I can immediately see how I'm reacting to it. I'm immediately sort of drawn there. It's like a moth to a flame. But over time, that awareness allows me to respond with greater clarity, with the noticing of it, with a pause, with greater calmness, rather than just being swept away by the automatic nature of this reactivity. And I can pause and reflect, before responding. The simple act of pausing, just saying, oh, let me see what's coming up, but don't necessarily respond. It creates that space for a choice to arise. It helps us choose a skillful response, which might be no response at all, rather than reacting impulsively. So much harmful behavior comes from reactivity. I punch you, you punch me back. I curse at you, you curse me back. We're just off to the races. Another important tool here is equanimity, the practice of maintaining balance, staying grounded and calm in the face of life's ups and downs. We remind ourselves of impermanence, of interconnection. We loosen our attachment to outcomes. We don't try to control everything. We approach life with greater ease. That, to me, is one of the greatest gifts of this path, is that ability to loosen our attachment to outcomes. We're not always trying to pull the levers, push the buttons, get everything to go the way we want it to go, which can be exhausting. Believe me, I know from experience. It can be consuming and exhausting. And then another powerful antidote for reactivity is gratitude. If I'm focused on what I'm grateful for in the present moment, I shift my attention away from scarcity, from dissatisfaction, negativity. My heart is more open because that's what gratitude does. Gratitude, in some ways, is just not compatible with reactivity. It's just not easily accessed when we're in a state of feeling grateful. You know, One of the things that often triggers reactivity is feeling separate. Seeing others as obstacles, seeing others as threats, seeing others as the enemy, whatever. So when we practice compassion, it helps us recognize our shared humanity. We respond to others not so much with reactivity, but with greater understanding, with compassion. Reactivity unchecked becomes a form of bondage. It imprisons us. It ties us to patterns of suffering and keeps us from experiencing the fullness of life. If you really reflect on it, I think we begin to see how it does become a form of bondage, how we're always in reactive mode. I don't like this. I like that. This isn't okay. That's okay. That's not okay. On and on and on. They shouldn't do that. They should do this. It's just endless and it's exhausting. But when we begin to loosen the grip of reactivity on our path, we step into a more expansive way of existing. And, where life is not just a series of problems to solve, it's not just a series of obstacles to overcome, which is what reactivity is all about. Everything is a problem, everything is an obstacle. I've got to constantly be entangled in that. How about if we see life as this unfolding mystery, something we don't control, but we sort of just open to? This dance of impermanence, if you will, participating in life with an open heart and a clear mind. The wonder of life is always present. It's waiting to be discovered right now, in the moment. We just have to turn our attention there. And it is not found in the big dramatic things. It's found in the small, ordinary moments. The beauty of that flower, that moment with a loved one, a beautiful piece of music, a sunrise. I mean, it's all there if we aren't so consumed in this web of reactivity. It just really gets in the way. When we begin to loosen the grip of these habitual responses, when we embrace our lives with mindfulness, we wake up and live with a sense of awe, gratitude, and peace. This is the gift of the Dharma that the Buddha promised. It's the opportunity to see reality as it truly is, not encumbered by a constant barrage of reactive responses. We experience the profound wonder of simply being alive. So we set an intention to notice when reactivity is coming up. And of course it's going to come up. It's going to come up a lot. But we begin to notice it, pay attention to it, put a pause in there when we can. Let go of this kind of hamster wheel that we can get on with our reactivity. So those are some thoughts today on reactivity and suffering.